You moved my kids to a damp basement without telling me?
It's practical. Our other grandson needs the rooms.
It's not a big deal. Kids adapt.
Family emergency?
They put my kids in a moldy basement. Go, I'll cover. And Jessica, come back with answers, not permission. Take the cash. Stop the drama.
Be grateful for once. Where would you even go?
I already went. Mentally. Now physically.
Sign. It's family duty. Your signature saves us.
I can't sign a loan for this house because I'm closing on my house.
You what?
With whose money? That stays. Proper line. Mark's son gets it.
You're right. It needs a stable home. I'm building one you'll never touch.
I'm Jessica, 35, a pediatric nurse and a single mom to 10-year-old twins. After a nasty divorce, moving back in with my parents was supposed to be our lifeline, our chance to get back on our feet. But that dream shattered the day my own mother looked at my kids, her grandkids for a decade, and said, "They're moving to the basement. Our real grandson deserves the best rooms." Just like that, my children became an inconvenience, an obstacle. But as my family pushed us into the shadows, they had no clue I was hiding a secret. A $30,000 secret that was about to become their biggest problem. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, let me know where you're watching from. And make sure to subscribe, because you're going to want to witness this. At home, I was a ghost. A background character in the story of my own family, a footnote to the grand saga of my brother Mark and his golden child. My opinions were noise, my children were furniture, and my presence was a temporary inconvenience they tolerated. But the moment I pushed through the double doors of the pediatric ward at the hospital, everything changed. The sterile smell of antiseptic, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the quiet hum of life-saving machinery. That was the air I could actually breathe. There, I wasn't Jessica the struggling daughter, or Jessica the divorced single mom. I was Jessica the nurse. And in that world, I wasn't invisible. I was essential. My job wasn't easy. It was a brutal, soul-crushing, beautiful ballet of controlled chaos. 12 hours on your feet. 12 hours of beeping machines, scared parents holding their breath, and impossible decisions that had to be made in a heartbeat. I didn't just hand out medication or check vitals. I worked in the PICU, the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit. My patients were the sickest of the sick. Tiny little fighters with tubes and wires coming out of them, their chests rising and falling with the help of a machine. My job was to stand in the gap between them and whatever was trying to take them. To be the calm in their parents' storm. To notice the one tiny change on a monitor that could mean the difference between going home and not going home. My father called it a glorified cleaning job. He couldn't see past the bedpans and the bodily fluids. He didn't understand the science, the pharmacology, the sheer mental fortitude it took to hold a mother's hand while a doctor delivered the worst news of her life, and then turn around and walk into the next room to celebrate a child finally breathing on their own. He didn't get it. But my colleagues did. My supervisors did. And that was all that mattered. I became the person they called when a patient was crashing, the one who could get an IV into a vein so small it was barely visible, the one who could talk down a terrified teenager or soothe a screaming toddler without raising my voice. I threw myself into the work. It was my refuge. I took every extra shift I could get my hands on. Overnight shifts, holiday shifts, shifts other people called in sick for. My kids, Leo and Mia, were troopers. They understood, in the way that kids sometimes do, that this was necessary. On the nights I was home, I'd make sure every minute counted. We'd build forts in the living room, have movie marathons, and I'd listen to every single detail about their day. But the exhaustion was a heavy cloak I couldn't seem to take off. My mother would see the dark circles under my eyes and say something like, "You're working yourself to the bone, Jessica. Is it really worth it for that little bit of extra cash?" She didn't get it either. It was never about a little bit of extra cash. About a year into living at my parents' house, my unit manager, a stern but fair woman named Sarah, called me into her office. I thought I was in trouble. My heart pounded. Maybe I'd made a documentation error. Maybe a parent had complained. She told me to close the door. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was an internal job posting. Charge nurse. The leader of the shift. The person who managed patient assignments, dealt with staffing crises, and was the ultimate clinical resource for the entire floor. A major step up. I want you to apply, Sarah said, her voice leaving no room for argument. You've earned it. You're one of the best nurses I've had in 20 years. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Recognition. Respect. It was like I had been wandering in a desert and someone had just handed me a cold bottle of water. I applied. I got the job. The promotion changed things. The pay bump was significant, but it was more than that. It was a shift in my own mind. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something. Every brutal 12-hour shift, every holiday I missed, every school event I couldn't attend, it all went towards a single purpose. It wasn't just a job. It was a mission. And the mission had one name: freedom. That's when the secret started. My weapon. Every night after the kids were asleep, after my parents had gone to bed, when the house was finally dark and silent, I would perform a small secret ritual. I'd sit in my bed, the covers pulled up to my chin, and I'd open my banking app on my phone. The glow of the screen would illuminate my face in the darkness. I had 2 accounts. A checking account, where my paycheck went, and from which I paid all our bills and gave my parents money for groceries. This account was always hovering near empty. It was the account that supported their narrative of me as the struggling, broke, single mom. But then, there was the other one, the high-yield savings account, the one no one knew about. Every single extra dollar went in there. The overtime pay, the holiday bonuses, the pay increase from my promotion. I lived as though I was still making my old salary, funneling the difference directly into that secret account before I could even be tempted to spend it. I would watch the number grow. First, it was $5,000, then 10. It felt like a mountain. Then it crossed the $15,000 mark. Then 20. My heart would beat a little faster every time I looked at it. It wasn't just money. It was ammo. It was an escape hatch. It was a future where my kids could have their own rooms, where they could make noise without being shushed, where their artwork would be treated like a masterpiece on our own refrigerator. They had no idea. They saw me come home, exhausted, in my scrubs. They saw me pinch pennies and buy the generic brand of cereal. They heard me say, "Money is tight," when they asked for something expensive. And they believed it. They treated me with a kind of condescending pity, the poor, divorced daughter who couldn't manage her life. They had absolutely no idea that while they were busy celebrating Mark's imaginary successes, I had quietly built a war chest. They didn't know that I now had over $30,000 saved up. They didn't know I had spent months meticulously paying down my old credit card debt, and that my credit score was now sitting at a beautiful, near-perfect 780. They saw a mouse scurrying around the edges of their perfect family. They had no idea they were living with a lion, and that the lion was just waiting for the right moment to roar. The shift started subtly. It wasn't one big explosion, but a series of small, unsettling tremors that warned of a coming earthquake. It began with the questions. My mother, Carol, who usually only spoke to me to criticize my parenting or point out a mess I hadn't cleaned up yet, suddenly developed a keen interest in my career. She'd corner me while I was trying to make breakfast for the kids, her voice dripping with a fake sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "So, Jessica," she'd start, "how are things at the hospital? Everything stable?" It was the way she said stable that got me, like she was asking about a patient on life support, not my job. Then came the follow-ups. Are you getting enough hours? Do you think you'll be able to stay on there for a while? My father, Robert, had his own version of this weird interrogation. He'd sit at the head of the dinner table watching me eat and make passive-aggressive comments into the air. This house is starting to feel a little crowded, he'd sigh, looking at the ceiling. Funny how quickly a two-person home can feel like a packed apartment. Myth. He never looked at me when he said it, but the message was as clear as if he'd pointed a finger right between my eyes. Then came Mark and Chloe. Their visits became more frequent and more purposeful. They wouldn't just drop by to let Noah play. They'd wander through the house like prospective buyers at an open house. I caught Mark in the hallway once, phone in hand, seemingly measuring the width with an app. Chloe would stand in the doorway of the twins' room, a thoughtful, calculating look on her face, before whispering something to Mark. They were like vultures circling, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my kids and I were the prey. I had this gnawing sensation in the pit of my stomach. It was a low, constant hum of anxiety, the kind you get when you're driving and you see a police car in your rearview mirror, even when you know you haven't done anything wrong. I knew something was being planned. A decision was being made about me, without me. I just didn't know what it was. Every time I tried to bring it up, to ask my mother what was going on, she'd just wave her hand dismissively and say that familiar, infuriating phrase. "Oh, Jessica, you're being overly sensitive again." It was their go-to weapon, a way to invalidate my feelings and shut down any conversation before it could even begin. They were gaslighting me into believing I was crazy, while they were sharpening their knives behind my back. The earthquake hit on a Tuesday. It was a particularly brutal shift. We had a 3-car pileup on the interstate, which meant the pediatric ward was slammed with trauma cases. For 12 solid hours, I didn't sit down. I barely had time to use the bathroom, let alone check my phone. It was pure adrenaline-fueled chaos. When I finally got a moment to breathe, slumped against a supply closet, I pulled out my phone. My screen was lit up with notifications. A string of missed texts from both Leo and Mia. My blood ran cold. I scrolled to the first one. From Mia. "Mom, Grandma, and Grandpa are acting weird." My thumb trembled as I scrolled down. From Leo. "They're in our room. Uncle Mark is here too. They're moving our stuff." Then another. From Mia. "Grandma says we have to move to the basement. This isn't fair." My breath hitched in my throat. The basement. Our basement wasn't a finished, cozy rec room. It was an unfinished concrete cellar. Damp. Cold. Riddled with spiders and God knows what else. It sometimes flooded when it rained hard. Leo's asthma. I kept scrolling, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. From Leo. "Mom, please come home. They took all our things downstairs." And then the last one. The one that shattered what was left of my composure. From Mia. "I hate it here. It's cold and gross and I hate it." I shot up from the floor and ran to my supervisor's office, my voice shaking as I explained I had a family emergency. She took one look at my face and nodded, arranging for another nurse to cover the last hour of my shift. That hour felt like a lifetime. The 20-minute drive home felt like an eternity. My mind was a vortex of fury and fear. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I saw it. The window to the twins' bedroom, the one that always had Leo's drawings taped to the inside, was dark and empty. I stormed through the front door. The scene in the living room confirmed everything. My children, my 10-year-old babies, were huddled together on the couch, wrapped in a single blanket. Their faces were pale, their eyes red and puffy from crying. They looked so small, so defeated. And in the kitchen, I could hear laughter. My mother and Chloe were sitting at the table, sipping tea, chatting as if it were just another Tuesday afternoon. "What is going on?" My voice was dangerously quiet. Mia jumped up and threw her arms around my waist, burying her face in my scrubs. "They moved us, Mom," she sobbed. "They put all our beds and our toys in the gross basement. They said we don't deserve the good rooms anymore." Leo just nodded miserably, unable to speak. "Grandpa said Uncle Mark's family needs more space," he whispered. "He said they're more important right now." More important. The words echoed in my head. I hugged them both tightly, my anger a white-hot furnace in my chest. I gently pushed them back onto the couch and walked into the kitchen. The laughter died the moment they saw my face. "Why?" I began, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Are my children's belongings in the unfinished mold-infested basement?" Chloe had the audacity to look bored. She took a slow sip of her tea before answering. "We just needed to make some adjustments to the living arrangements. Mark and I need a proper nursery for Noah, and with my company going fully remote, I need a dedicated home office." "A home office," I repeated, the words tasting like poison. "So you chose my children's bedroom, and you decided to move them into an unsafe cellar without even the courtesy of a phone call?" That's when my mother finally looked at me, her expression cold and hard. "It was the most logical solution, Jessica. The children are older. They can adapt. Besides," she said, delivering the killing blow, "our other grandson deserves the best rooms." "Our other grandson. Not Noah. Not your nephew. Our other grandson." As if Leo and Mia were some lesser, second-tier version. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. Just then, my father and Mark walked in through the back door, carrying a brand-new, expensive-looking crib still in the box. They stopped when they saw the tension in the room. "Oh, good. You're home," my father said, oblivious. "We've made some changes." "I can see that," I shot back. "You moved my asthmatic son into a damp basement with visible mold." Mark actually rolled his eyes. He let out an exasperated sigh as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Jessica, you're overreacting, as usual," he said, the condescension dripping from his voice. "Kids are resilient. They'll be fine. It's not like they're living on the street." I looked from my father's dismissive face, to my mother's cold indifference, to my brother's smug entitlement, to my sister-in-law's bored apathy. I was surrounded. 4 adults, my own family, had conspired to do this. They had looked at my sweet, wonderful children and decided they were disposable. That their comfort, their safety, their emotional well-being meant less than a nursery that would be used occasionally and a home office for Chloe. There was no remorse, no understanding. The only annoyance was that I dared to challenge their decision. Then, my father did something that would forever burn itself into my memory. He must have seen the fury in my eyes, the way my hands were clenched into fists at my sides. He must have mistaken my righteous anger for desperate hysterics. "Look," he said, his voice softening into a tone of patronizing pity that was 1,000 times more insulting than his anger. "Maybe the problem isn't the room. Maybe the problem is that you're feeling the financial pressure and you're taking it out on us." I stared at him, speechless. "What? This has nothing to do with money. This is about my kids." "Is it?" he said. And then he reached into his back pocket, pulled out his worn leather wallet and took out 2 crisp $100 bills. He held them out to me, like a handout, like a tip. "Here," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Take these $200. Go get a cheap motel room for the night. Let the kids have a little adventure, cool off. But tomorrow, you come back here and you accept the reality of the situation. We can't always cater to your drama." $200. That was the price tag they put on my children's safety, on my dignity as a mother. They thought my love, my fury, my protective instincts could all be bought and paid for. They thought they could silence me with cash. In that moment, watching him stand there holding out that money, with my mother nodding in approval and my brother looking on smugly. I realized the truth. They didn't just see me as an inconvenience. They saw me as pathetic, weak, a charity case whose feelings could be managed with a paltry sum of money, and that was it. The last thread of hope I had for this family snapped. I'm at a loss for words to describe the feeling of that moment. The absolute betrayal. If you're feeling as outraged as I am right now, help me out. Comment with just one word to describe what this family did. But instead of breaking down, something else happened. The rage didn't vanish. It solidified. It turned from a raging fire into a cold, hard diamond in the center of my chest. A crystal-clear purpose. They would never see me as an equal. They would never respect me. And I was done trying to make them. My father's hand was still outstretched, the $200 held between his thumb and forefinger like a dirty secret. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The roaring inferno of rage that had been consuming me didn't burn out. It collapsed inward, compressing itself under the immense pressure of that final betrayal until it formed something new, something cold, hard, and unbreakable. The tears that had been threatening to spill simply vanished. The frantic, desperate need to scream, to fight, to make them understand, evaporated into thin air. All that was left was a profound, chilling calm. It was the calm of a surgeon before a life-or-death operation, the calm of a general on the eve of a battle. He knew he had to win. There was no more room for hope. There was no more space for wishful thinking. The fantasy that I had clung to for 35 years, the fantasy that one day, if I was good enough, responsible enough, successful enough, they would finally see me, finally love me for who I was. That fantasy died right there in that kitchen. It was a mercy killing, because in its place, a cold, hard truth took root. They will never change. It was a simple thought, but it was liberating. It freed me from the endless cycle of trying and failing, of hoping and being disappointed. And a second thought followed, just as powerful. And neither will I. I would not shrink myself down to fit into their tiny, suffocating box anymore. I was done playing their game. I looked at the money. Then I looked at my father's face. I didn't say a word. I simply turned my back on him, on all of them, and walked out of the kitchen. I went back to the living room, where Leo and Mia were watching me with wide, terrified eyes. The sight of their fear reignited the cold fire inside me, forging it into a singular purpose. I knelt in front of them, forcing a smile onto my face that I didn't feel. It wasn't a fake smile. It was a warrior's smile, a promise. "Hey," I said softly, my voice steady for the first time all evening. "How about we get out of here?" And then I spoke the 3 words that would detonate the life we had known. "Pack your bags." Leo's eyes widened. "For real, Mom?" "For real," I said, nodding. "Just the important stuff. Your favorite toys? Your most important books? We'll get the rest later. Trust me." My father had followed me out of the kitchen. "Oh, for God's sake, Jessica," he sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. "Stop being so dramatic. Nobody is asking you to leave." I stood up and faced him, my newfound calm acting as a shield. "You're right," I said, my voice even. "You're not asking me to leave. You're telling me, in no uncertain terms, where my children and I stand in this family. And we deserve better." My mother and Mark and Chloe all crowded into the living room, forming a united front of disbelief and annoyance. The gang was all here for the final showdown. But I wasn't there to fight. I was there to exit. "You can't just leave because things didn't go your way," my mother pleaded, her tone shifting from anger to a manufactured, whiny hurt. "This isn't about things not going my way," I explained calmly, as if speaking to a child. This is about a fundamental lack of respect and human decency, something that has been sorely lacking in this household for a very, very long time. As Leo and Mia scrambled upstairs, my brother Mark stepped forward, a smug, knowing smirk on his face. "And where exactly do you think you're going to go?" he asked, the question dripping with ridicule. "It's not like you've been saving much, with your spending habits." They all shared that look, the look that said, "She's trapped. She has no other options. She'll yell and scream, and then she'll back down, just like she always does." I let the silence hang in the air for a beat. I looked at each of them, memorizing their arrogant, confident faces. "That's where you're wrong," I said quietly. And then I dropped the first of my own bombs. "I've been saving since the day I moved in here. I've been working extra shifts. And 3 weeks ago, I signed a lease on a house not far from here." The stunned silence was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. We walked out of that house and didn't look back. I drove us straight to my friend Linda's place. She was a fellow nurse, a single mom like me, and one of the few people in the world who knew the whole ugly story. She took one look at our faces, at the hastily packed backpacks and the tear-streaked cheeks of my kids, and just opened her door wider. No questions asked. She set the kids up with hot chocolate and a movie in her living room, and then she sat with me at her kitchen table while I just breathed. Later that night, long after the kids had fallen asleep on an air mattress in Linda's spare room, I didn't cry. I didn't pace the floor. I opened my laptop. The glow from the screen was my new campfire. First, I logged into my secret bank account. The number was still there. My beautiful, hard-won number. It was real. Next, I pulled up my email and found the contact information for a real estate agent I'd spoken to a few months prior, a friend of a friend who specialized in helping single moms. I sent her an email with the subject line, "Ready to buy." Then I opened a new browser tab and started researching tenancy laws in our state, just in case. Every keystroke was deliberate. Every click was a step further away from the person I used to be. I was no longer reacting. I was planning. The next morning, I took a personal day from work. I had one last grim task to perform. I had to go back to that house to retrieve our belongings. Linda offered to go with me, but I refused. This was something I had to do alone. I arrived to find the house eerily quiet. My father answered the door with a scowl. "Come to apologize for your tantrum?" was the first thing he said. "No," I replied evenly. "I've come to get our things." I worked methodically, packing boxes with a detached efficiency. Clothes, books, school supplies. I refused to let the memories of the place touch me. It was just a house. It was never a home. As I was packing the last of my personal items from the small guest room I had occupied, my eyes fell on something I had almost forgotten. On the dresser was a small antique mantel clock. It was made of dark oak, with an intricate hand-carved design. It didn't work anymore, but it had been made by my great-grandfather, and it was one of the few things I truly cherished. It had always been promised to me. A piece of my history. I carefully wrapped it in a towel and started to carry it downstairs. My mother was waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs, her arms crossed over her chest. Her eyes were fixed on the clock in my hands. "Where do you think you're going with that?" she asked, her voice flat and cold. "It's mine, Mom," I said, confused. "Great-grandpa wanted me to have it." She shook her head slowly, a sad, resolute smile on her face that was more terrifying than any scream. "No, Jessica," she said. "That clock belongs in this house. It's a family heirloom. It stays here, where it belongs. It will be passed down the proper line to Mark, and then to his son Noah. It needs a permanent home, a stable foundation." The words hung in the air between us. a stable foundation. The implication was a physical blow. It knocked the wind out of me. She wasn't just talking about the clock. She was talking about me. In her eyes, I was unstable, temporary, unworthy of carrying on the family legacy. My life, my struggles, my very existence as a single mother made me illegitimate. They weren't just kicking me out of their house. They were trying to erase me from their history, to declare my branch of the family tree dead and withered. A hot, bitter wave of fury washed over me, so intense it made me dizzy. This was their final act of cruelty, to take the one tangible piece of my past, the one link to a grandfather who had loved me, and use it as a weapon to invalidate my entire future. I looked at her face, at the cold certainty in her eyes, and I knew that arguing would be pointless, begging would be humiliating. So I did the one thing she didn't expect. I stopped. I gently walked over to a nearby end table and placed the clock down with the utmost care. I didn't look at it. I looked directly at her. "You're right," I said, and the calmness in my own voice surprised even me. "It deserves a stable home." And then I turned and walked out the front door, leaving the clock, the house, and the last remnants of my childhood behind. As I got into my car, the phantoms of my family watched me from the doorway. They probably thought they had won. They thought they had broken me. They had taken my home, insulted my motherhood, and now they had stolen my heritage. But they were wrong. They hadn't broken me. They had just given me a new mission, a new purpose. I wasn't just going to find a home. I was going to become the stable foundation. I was going to build my own legacy from scratch. A legacy not of old wood and broken gears, but of resilience, strength, and unconditional love. And it was a legacy they would never, ever be a part of. The silence lasted for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of blissful, uninterrupted peace. No passive-aggressive texts, no guilt-tripping voicemails, no unexpected drop-ins. In the cozy sanctuary of Linda's spare room, my children started to heal. The haunted, anxious look in their eyes began to fade, replaced by the carefree sparkle I had missed so desperately. Leo started drawing again, filling pages with fantastical creatures and vibrant landscapes. Mia practiced her clarinet without fear of being shushed. The slightly off-key notes a beautiful symphony of freedom to my ears. We were living out of suitcases in a cramped space, but for the first time in 2 years, we felt like we were home. I was moving forward, finalizing the details on our new rental house, arranging for movers, and dreaming of the simple joy of having our own front door key. Then, the phone rang. It was my mother. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail like all the others. But a strange curiosity, mixed with a final foolish flicker of hope, made me answer. Her voice was completely different. The cold, dismissive tone was gone, replaced by a warm, almost syrupy sweetness. "Jessica, honey," she cooed. "We've all had some time to cool down and, well, your father and I miss you. We miss the kids. It's just not the same here without you." She talked about how quiet the house was, how she'd made my favorite lasagna for dinner the other night, and almost started crying because I wasn't there to eat it. It was a masterful performance. She was playing the part of the heartbroken mother, and for a terrifying second, the old, familiar guilt started to creep back in. "We want to make things right," she continued. "We want to have a proper family meeting. All of us, here at the house, this Sunday, just to talk, to clear the air, for the sake of the family." Family. The word felt like a lie in my mouth, but I knew this was a confrontation I couldn't avoid forever. I needed to draw the final line in the sand. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. "I'll be there," I said, "but I'm coming alone." When I walked into that house on Sunday, the atmosphere was thick with a strange, rehearsed calm. It was a stage, and they were all actors playing their parts. My father, Robert, stood up and gave me an awkward, one-armed hug, patting my back like I was a distant cousin. My brother, Mark, managed a tight-lipped smile, and Chloe offered me a glass of iced tea. My mother, Carol, was the lead actress, fussing over me, asking if I was hungry, if I was comfortable. It was all so fake, so transparently manipulative, that it didn't even hurt. It was just interesting. I felt like an anthropologist observing a strange, dysfunctional tribe. They sat me down at the dining room table, the very table that was supposed to be the heart of our family, and they formed a semicircle around me. They were the judges, and I was the one on trial. My father cleared his throat, assuming his role as the patriarch. "Jessica," he began, his voice laced with a solemn, practiced gravity. "We know that things got heated. Words were said that shouldn't have been said. But we are a family, and families stick together, through thick and thin. They support each other." Then it was Mark's turn. He launched into a long, rambling story about his tech startup. He talked about unexpected contractor costs for his home renovation, supply chain issues, and a big project that was just on the cusp of landing but required a little more capital up front. He painted himself as the struggling entrepreneur, the visionary on the verge of greatness, if only he could overcome these pesky, temporary hurdles. My mother provided the emotional anchor. "We've been so worried about him," she said, dabbing at a dry eye with a napkin. "And we know you've always been the responsible one, the one who understands the importance of helping family." They were building a case, brick by brick. They were laying a trap, and they thought I was too stupid or too emotionally broken to see the steel jaws waiting to snap shut. I just sat there, listening. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I just sipped my iced tea and let them play out their little drama. Finally, my father delivered the punchline. He slid a stack of official-looking documents across the table towards me, along with a pen. "Your mother and I have been talking," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We've found a way to solve all of Mark's problems and secure this family's future. We're going to take out a second mortgage on the house, a home equity loan. It's the only way." I looked down at the papers. It was a loan application for $50,000. "This house is this family's main asset," he continued, his confidence growing. "It's your inheritance, just as much as it is Mark's. We just need you to sign as a co-applicant. A formality, really. It just shows the bank that the whole family is on board, that we are united." "After all," he said, delivering the final condescending line, "you'll be living here for the foreseeable future anyway, so you might as well invest in its future. It's for all of us." There it was, the grand finale. The reason for the fake smiles, the lasagna story, and the talk of family unity. It wasn't about clearing the air. It wasn't about making things right. It was about money. My signature. They were so sure of themselves. They had cornered me. They had laid out the perfect logical argument wrapped in the warm, fuzzy blanket of family. They truly believed I had no choice but to pick up that pen and sign away my future to bail out my golden boy brother one more time. They were waiting for the tears, the arguments, the eventual, weary submission. I looked at the papers. I looked at the pen. I looked at their 3 expectant, triumphant faces, and then I did something they didn't expect. I just sat there. I picked up my glass of iced tea and took a slow, deliberate sip. I let the silence stretch. Let it become awkward. Let their confident smiles start to falter. I could see the confusion starting to creep into their eyes. This wasn't part of the script. Finally, I placed the glass back on the table with a soft click. The sound seemed to echo in the silent room. I folded my hands on the table in front of me and looked directly at my father. "I can't sign this," I said. My voice was calm, even, devoid of any emotion. My father's face clouded over. What do you mean you can't sign it? Don't be difficult, Jessica. We just explained why this is so important. Oh, I understand completely why it's important to you, I said, still calm. But I'm afraid I can't sign. And why is that? My mother snapped, the sweet facade crumbling away to reveal the familiar, sharp-edged impatience beneath. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I had been replaying in my mind for 3 weeks. The moment my new life began. I looked at each of them, one by one, holding their gaze. I can't sign a mortgage application for this house, I said, letting each word land with the weight of a stone. Because my name is about to be on the deed to a different house. I let that sink in. Mark just looked confused. What the hell are you talking about? I turned my attention to him. I'm talking about my house, the one I'm buying. I was pre-approved for my own mortgage last week. My offer on a 3-bedroom house just 10 minutes from the hospital was accepted yesterday morning. We close at the end of the month. And then I delivered the final, fatal blow, the one aimed directly at the heart of their entire narrative about me. It turns out, I said, a small, genuine smile finally touching my lips, that having a stable career, a 6-figure income, and a near-perfect credit score makes the banks very eager to lend you money. Who knew? Silence. It was a profound, absolute silence, the kind that sucks all the air out of a room. I saw it on their faces. The shock, the disbelief, the frantic, panicked recalculations happening behind their eyes as the world they thought they knew, the power structure they had so carefully built, crumbled into dust around them. They had come to this table expecting to find a broken, desperate mouse. Instead, they had found a lion, and she was done being caged. I didn't say another word. I just sat there in the ringing silence, sipping my iced tea, and watched their entire world fall apart. For a full 10 seconds, nobody moved. It was like I'd pressed the pause button on reality. The 3 of them just stared at me, their faces frozen in identical masks of slack-jawed disbelief. My father, Robert, was the first to glitch. His mouth opened and closed a few times, like a fish out of water, before he finally managed to stammer out a single, incredulous question. A house? What are you talking about? Where would you get the money for a house? The question was so revealing. It wasn't how you did it. It wasn't why didn't you tell us. It was where did you get the money? In his mind, it was an impossibility. The idea of me, Jessica, the struggling single mom being financially capable of such a thing was so far outside his realm of reality that it simply did not compute. I kept my voice level, matter of fact. I was a doctor delivering a diagnosis, not a daughter delivering a bombshell. I told you, Dad, I've been saving. My promotion to charge nurse came with a significant salary increase. I've been putting away every extra dollar for the last 2 years. My credit is excellent. The bank was more than happy to approve my loan. The word loan seemed to snap my brother Mark out of his trance. His face, which had been pale with shock, suddenly flooded with a dark, ugly red. He shot up from his chair, his hands clenched into fists. "A loan? You got a loan?" he yelled, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and panic. "Are you kidding me? You went behind our backs and got a loan for yourself when you knew I needed capital? When you knew my business was on the line?" The sheer, unadulterated entitlement of it was breathtaking. He wasn't mad that I was successful. He was mad that my success didn't directly benefit him. My money, in his mind, was his money. My resources were his resources. I wasn't a person. I was just a walking, talking emergency fund that had suddenly refused to be cashed out. "Your business is not my responsibility, Mark," I said calmly. That's when the chaos truly erupted. The carefully constructed stage play of the concerned family fell apart, revealing the raw, ugly reality underneath. It was a chain reaction of panic. My mother, Carol, was the next to break. The fake tears she'd been mustering earlier turned into real, heaving sobs of despair. But she wasn't crying for me, or for our broken relationship. She was crying over the loss of control. "How could you do this to us, Jessica?" she wailed, her voice rising in pitch. "How could you be so selfish? We were counting on you. Your brother was counting on you." My father started pacing the length of the dining room, running a hand through his thinning hair. I could almost see the gears turning in his head, the frantic calculations of what this meant. No loan. No. $50,000. Mark's business is ailing. The potential for public failure, for humiliation among his friends at the country club. His entire carefully curated image of the successful patriarch with the successful son was crumbling before his eyes. "This is a joke, right?" Mark said, his voice dropping to a desperate, menacing hiss. He leaned across the table, his face inches from mine. "This is some kind of sick, twisted joke to get back at us for the basement thing. Okay, you've made your point. Now stop it. Tell us it's not true." "It's true," I said simply. And that's when they turned on me. All of them. The shock and panic curdled into pure, undiluted rage, and they aimed it all directly at me. I was no longer the daughter or the sister. I was the enemy, the saboteur, the villain who had single-handedly destroyed their perfect world. Mark was the loudest. You did this," he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at my face. "You've been planning this all along, haven't you? Playing the poor little victim all while you were plotting to ruin me. You couldn't stand to see me succeed, so you decided to destroy the whole family. It's all your fault." The blame. It was their default setting. Nothing was ever their fault. Mark's poor business decisions? My fault. Their financial irresponsibility? My fault. Their years of emotional abuse and neglect? My fault for being overly sensitive. It was the twisted logic of a narcissistic system, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just seeing it. I was immune to it. His words, which once would have cut me to the core, now felt like pebbles being thrown against a brick wall. My mother switched tactics. She saw that anger wasn't working, so she tried emotional manipulation. The wailing intensified. "After everything we've done for you," she sobbed, clutching her chest dramatically. "We gave you a roof over your head when you had nowhere else to go. I helped you with the children. How can you repay us like this? How can you be so cruel to your own mother?" It was a masterful guilt trip, honed by years of practice. But it didn't work. Not anymore. Because I remembered. I remembered the roof over my head came with a price of constant criticism. I remembered the help with the children was conditional and always came second to Mark's slightest whim. I remembered the cruelty of that basement. Then came the final stage, the threats. My father stopped pacing. He stood directly in front of me, his body rigid with fury. He was used to being in control. He was the king of this little castle, and I had just led a rebellion. "You listen to me, young lady," he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "You are going to fix this. You are going to call that bank. You are going to cancel whatever ridiculous deal you've made, and you are going to sign these papers. You are going to do your duty to this family. If you walk out that door without fixing this, then as far as I'm concerned, you are no longer my daughter." The ultimatum. The final desperate power play. The threat that had kept me in line for my entire life. The fear of being disowned, of being cast out, had always been my invisible cage. But now, standing there, I realized something profound. You can't be cast out of a place you've never truly belonged to. You can't be disowned by a family that never truly owned you as one of their own. He wasn't taking anything away from me. He was just finally saying out loud what his actions had been screaming for years. The house was filled with the cacophony of their panic. Mark was on his phone, presumably trying to call the bank himself, yelling at some poor customer service representative. My mother was still sobbing. My father was glaring at me, waiting for my submission. They were a storm of chaos, and in the middle of it all, I was the calm, silent I. They expected me to break, to cry, to beg for forgiveness, to pick up the pen and restore their broken world. But I had nothing left to say to them. I had already said everything that mattered. So I stood up. I calmly picked up my purse from the chair beside me. I didn't look at them. I didn't offer a final word. I just turned, walked to the front door, and let myself out into the cool evening air. The sound of the door clicking shut behind me was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a cage door swinging open, the sound of chains breaking. It was the sound of my life, my real life, finally beginning. The drive back to Linda's apartment was a blur. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. My eyes were dry, but my phone was having a seizure. It buzzed and vibrated relentlessly in the cup holder, the screen lighting up with a frantic, desperate dance of incoming calls and texts. My father, my mother, my brother, my father again. The notifications piled up, a digital representation of their spiraling panic. They were throwing every manipulation tactic they had at me, hoping something would stick. The texts were a masterclass in emotional whiplash. From my mother, "Jessica, please come back. We can talk about this. Your father didn't mean it. We're all just very stressed." Followed moments later by one from my father. "You have 5 minutes to turn this car around and come back here and act like a responsible adult, or you are dead to me. I'm not bluffing." Then came Mark. "I can't believe you would destroy our family over money. I hope you're happy." Guilt, threats, blame. It was their toxic trifecta, the three-pronged attack they had used to control me my entire life. But something was different this time. I wasn't reading the texts as a daughter. I was reading them as a case study. I saw the patterns. I saw the desperation. And I felt nothing. The words that once held so much power over me were now just empty noise. When I pulled into Linda's driveway, the phone was still buzzing. I picked it up, my thumb hovering over the screen. For 35 years, my life had been dictated by my desperate need to answer their calls, to soothe their feelings, to manage their expectations. My own needs, my own peace, were always secondary. No more. I took a deep breath. I opened my contacts. I found my father's name. I pressed the button that said, "Block this caller." A small pop-up asked me to confirm. I tapped it without hesitation. Then I did the same for my mother. And then, for my brother. 3 taps, 3 broken chains. It was that simple. I silenced the noise. I chose peace. For the first time in my life, I wasn't backing down. I was choosing myself. I was choosing my children. It was a monumental moment. If you support this powerful decision, if you're cheering for this new chapter, drop a flexing bicep emoji in the comments right now to send some strength her way on this journey. Because that strength, even from strangers, was exactly what she needed to start rebuilding. When I walked into Linda's apartment, the smell of pepperoni pizza and the sound of my children's laughter hit me like a wave. They were sitting on the floor with Linda, building a massive Lego castle, their faces bright and carefree. They were safe. They were happy. And in that moment, I knew, with a certainty that resonated in my very bones, that I had made the right decision. Linda looked up at me, her eyes full of questions. I just gave her a small, tired smile. "It's over," I said. "Good," she replied, nodding. "Because I bought ice cream, the good kind, with the giant chunks of cookie dough." And that was it. There was no dramatic debriefing, no tearful recounting of the events. We just were. We ate pizza on paper plates, sitting on the living room floor. We celebrated our Independence Day. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Linda and I sat on her small balcony, looking out at the city lights. "You know," she said quietly, "when I left my ex, everyone told me I was crazy. My own mother told me I was throwing my life away. But it was the best decision I ever made." She looked at me. "It's going to be hard sometimes, but it's going to be yours. Your life. Your rules." Her words were a balm to a wound I didn't even know was still bleeding. She wasn't family by blood, but in that moment, she was more of a sister to me than anyone had ever been. The next few days were a strange and wonderful whirlwind. My old life was trying desperately to claw its way back in. I got emails from my parents, alternating between rage and pleas. I got a frantic voicemail from my sister-in-law, Chloe, accusing me of being a sociopath. I ignored them all. I was focused on the future. And that's when my new family, my chosen family, began to reveal itself. A couple of days later, my boss, Sarah, the one who had pushed me to become charge nurse, called me into her office. My heart did a familiar little flip of anxiety, but her expression was kind. "Jessica," she said, getting straight to the point, "I don't know what's going on in your personal life, and it's none of my business. But I do know that for the last few weeks, you have come in here under what I can only imagine is immense personal stress, and you have been nothing short of exceptional. You've been focused, professional, and a rock for your team. Whatever you're going through, you're handling it with incredible grace." She paused. "The hospital has resources, counselors, financial advisors. If you need anything, and I mean anything at all, my door is always open." It wasn't pity. It was respect. It was a professional acknowledgement of my strength, something my own family had never been capable of giving me. I walked out of that office feeling 10 feet tall. Then, that evening, I got a call from an unexpected number. It was my Aunt Kathy, my mother's sister. She was the quiet one in the family, the one who always seemed to be observing from the sidelines at family gatherings. "Jessica, dear," she said, her voice warm and gentle. "I heard what happened. Your mother called me, ranting and raving. I wanted you to know that I am so, so proud of you." I was so shocked I couldn't speak. "I have watched them do this to you your entire life," she continued, a sad anger in her voice. "I never said anything, and that's my shame to bear. But you were right to leave. You were right to choose your children. What you did took more courage than they will ever understand." She then made an offer that brought tears to my eyes. "I know you're moving soon. I'd love to come and help. I can watch Leo and Mia while you direct the movers. I make a mean pot of chili. Just say the word." A friend who offered unconditional sanctuary. A boss who offered professional respect. An aunt who offered validation and a helping hand. They were the builders of my new foundation. They were showing me what family was supposed to look like. It wasn't about blood. It wasn't about obligation. It was about showing up. It was about choosing to lift someone, not hold them down. I hung up the phone with my aunt, a single happy tear rolling down my cheek. The buzzing from my old life had faded into the background, and for the first time, I could clearly hear the sound of my new life beginning. It was quiet. It was peaceful. And it was all mine. 6 months later, I'm sitting on the back porch of my own house, watching my kids run through the sprinklers in our very own backyard. Their shrieks of laughter are the only sound that matters. The house isn't huge. It doesn't have a formal dining room or a 4-car garage, but it's ours. The front of our refrigerator is a chaotic, beautiful mess of Leo's latest drawings and Mia's honor roll certificates. There are muddy footprints by the back door. The air smells like freshly cut grass and freedom. My life isn't perfect, but it's peaceful. It's a peace I earned, a peace I fought for. My promotion at the hospital has become permanent, and the steady, predictable hours mean I'm home for dinner every night. I'm no longer just surviving, I'm thriving. As for my old family, their world fell apart exactly as they had feared. My Aunt Kathy keeps me updated in small, sad little snippets. Without the $50,000 bailout from the Bank of Jessica, Mark's tech startup, the one that was always on the verge of greatness, finally imploded. He and Chloe had to sell their big, impressive house and move into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment. Mark, for the first time in his 32 years of life, had to get a real job, a 9-to-5, with a boss. My father, devastated by the failure of his golden child and facing a retirement they could no longer afford, sold the family home, the very house they had deemed me unworthy of inheriting. They downsized to a small condo in a retirement community an hour away. The stage for all their dramas had been sold to the highest bidder. About a month ago, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Mark. I almost threw it away, but something made me open it. The letter wasn't angry or demanding. It was apologetic. He wrote about the humiliation of having to look for a job, of having to live on a budget for the first time. He wrote that without me to be the family scapegoat, the cracks in his own life and his own marriage had become impossible to ignore. For the first time, he admitted that he had been selfish, entitled, and a terrible brother. He didn't ask for money. He didn't even ask for forgiveness. He just said he was sorry. I read the letter twice. I might write back someday. Maybe. I might agree to meet him for coffee in a neutral, public place. But the old relationship, the one where I was the giver and he was the taker, is dead and buried. Any future contact will be on my terms, with my boundaries, firmly in place. As I sit here, watching the sun set on our perfect, ordinary little life, I think about that old mantel clock, the one my mother said needed a stable foundation. They thought legacy was something you could own, something made of wood and brass that you could pass down. But they were wrong. Legacy isn't what you're given. It's what you build. It's the strength you show your children. It's the peace you fight to create. It's the quiet dignity of a life lived on your own terms. Family, I've learned, isn't about the blood you share. It's about the people who show up, the people who respect you, the people you choose to build your world with. My old family tried to erase me from their story, but they ended up giving me the greatest gift of all, the chance to write my own. And that brings me to you. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family members who refused to respect you? How did you navigate that impossible conversation? What unexpected sources of strength did you find when you decided to choose yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below. Let's create a community where we can learn from each other. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice and reclaiming your power. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the life you were given and start building the life you deserve.